Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.
And a very good evening to you and a very warm welcome to Newsline Prime. Once again, we're in a different set because our new studio is being made up. But in the meantime, this evening, we are going to be addressing some public concerns that are doing its rounds. And that is mainly to do with an erosion of the independence of Sri Lanka's parliament, perhaps a dilution of our sovereignty. And to explain all this and a little bit more, including a little bit of financial information that has just come about, we have with us that very vociferous public interest activist, Mr. Rusiripala Tennakoon. Very good evening to you, Mr. Rusiripala.
Good evening, Faraz.
Thank you very much for being on Newsline Prime. Now then, before we go on to the main subject, if you like, in the last few hours, you've managed to get some information, haven't you, on the state of lending by a state bank. And it is astonishing the level of non-performing loans that have apparently been given, and it's gone over the 3 months. Some of these, of course, when we looked at the list, says that it will be settled in this various dates given, and we noticed that today being the 20th, we still some of those arrangements have not materialized. But interestingly, I saw there that a company connected to the bond boys owes the state bank, non-performing basis, over 2 billion rupees. It looks like they're getting away with everything. Is this what does it do to the state of the finances of the state bank?
Actually, it looks like it is the seeping down of the prevailing unsatisfactory situation about the administration and the control of the economy that has gone down into the state banks as well. The non-performing status that you referred to is much more serious than what it is shown to appear as, because both banks, Bank of Ceylon and the People's Bank, are now loaded heavily with a very large sum as non-performing loans being transferred to more frequently and in larger volumes into that category as time goes on.
Is this because the economy is in trouble?
Not necessarily. It is mainly due to the bad portfolio handling by the banks.
So they're not looking at it properly before lending?
No, it is.
It's not responsible lending?
No, it is the irresponsibility on the part of the lending authorities, as well as there is a bit of corruption involved in it. Now, the non-performing figures of both banks, in the People's Bank it is going up to about 38 billion, and in the Bank of Ceylon it is 70 billion. And the 38 billion that is in the People's Bank is without taking into account the amounts that are due from the Sri Lankan Airlines and Mihin Lanka and some other very important state-owned enterprises. If they do come into this figure, into this category, or if they are taken into this category, the non-performing amount will go well beyond the Bank of Ceylon figure.
In percentage terms, what is the amount of non-performing as opposed to the amount lent?
Today, according to the latest information that we have, it's about it's exceeding 4%.
Exceeding 4%
in the non-performing section.
So is that worrying as a banker?
My God, it's a very bad indicator. It's an extremely bad indicator. And you may wonder, Faraz, you know, there are some new developments taking place in the banking industry. That is, you know, the expressway project that is going on. The Central Expressway. Do you know that the government has now come to some terms with the contractors who are foreign contractors who are ready to accept the repayment of their the services for their services in Sri Lankan rupees, because the government can't afford to pay them in dollars.
That's that is
My God, this
that's worrying. We did cover something about
exactly. You covered it, and that's a very worrying aspect as to how, when the amounts that have to be paid by foreign exchange, according to the agreements, the fact that the government cannot pay it, and the fact that they are servicing the loan in Ceylon rupees.
Mr. Rusiripala, I did read some notes on this, and in there it says that the cabinet approval has been given for a 100% concessionary loan. Now, the way I understand it, if it's a 100% concessionary loan,
Yeah.
then there's no cost to Sri Lanka, is there?
Concessionary in the sense to the
It says the cabinet is given approval
yes,
to obtain
Yeah.
a 100% concessionary loan,
yes,
and they give the names of various agencies like JICA and COICA and the ADB and so on.
yeah,
But they've entered into, finally, they've entered into an agreement with the Exim Bank of China.
yeah,
But it's only for 85%. And the 15%, I think, is what you're saying. They don't have that.
yes,
And now they've apparently persuaded the contractors, the overseas contractor,
yes,
to accept
yes,
rupees.
yes.
Now, what does that do to...
That facility has been taken up to, the extent of the facility runs to about 30 billion Sri Lankan rupees.
So that's also going to be lent by the state?
By the state banks.
By the state banks?
By the state banks.
And do you think they'll end up in NPL?
Sooner than later, that will go into NPL.
Like Sri Lankan Airlines?
Like Sri Lankan
But they're not with Sri Lankan Airlines, are they actually moving it to the NPL status?
The banks have been advised, according to our information, by the Auditor General as well as the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, according to the prevailing rules, to transfer them to the NPL section. But Bank of Ceylon has done it. Whether the People's Bank has done it is questionable. It has to be looked into.
Good. I'm sure your whistleblowers will continue to blow.
There's a lot of information that is available. We have to make it known and make it public in the public interest, for the banks to correct the course, at least in this belated hour.
Good. Let's do that and let's feature that in another program.
Yes.
Now, I want to get back to what we wanted to discuss this evening, which is, why is there so much of concern amongst the public about these agreements that are being signed or due to be signed with the United States, this SOFA agreement, the Status of Forces agreement?
Yes.
Even it has become general topic of conversation amongst people.
Yes.
It's obviously something that is bothering the people. What is SOFA? Why do we need SOFA?
Yes.
Why should we be worried about SOFA?
Whereas the main concern that is addressed by the people in talking about SOFA is the situation where American military forces are going to be physically present in the soils of Sri Lanka.
Right.
Now this is the main concern.
Yeah.
But besides that, there are several other aspects that have gone unnoticed in this whole affair.
Yeah.
Basically the main issue should have been, rather than being interested about the occupation of military forces in Sri Lanka, or bringing them into Sri Lanka, the question that we have to ask is, who initiated the SOFA agreement with Sri Lanka? Who wanted it?
Who was it?
Whose initiative it is? And who is behind this? So, I mean, Sri Lanka, if government of Sri Lanka wants this, they should have discussed this as a policy program in the parliament, at the cabinet level, and then come to a decision
based on that
we want the presence of American forces here. But we have not heard of, you and I have not heard of a thing like that.
Yeah.
Not in the recent past. But something is in the offing, in the dark. Something is happening unnoticed in the most non-transparent manner, that somebody is wanting the SOFA agreements to be entered into with Sri Lanka, and ipso facto, following arising out of that, for the armed forces to come here, for them to occupy here, and to discuss and debate about the jurisdictional situations of the application of laws. Whether this country laws will apply, or whether the laws of the United States will apply to the personnel who are here. I mean, those things have become the issues. Whereas the main issue should have been to determine as to why we need SOFA under American forces to come into Sri Lanka.
Yes.
Under any agreement.
Can you see a reason? I mean, okay, so what are you saying? That Sri Lanka didn't ask for this? Obviously, if Sri Lanka didn't ask, then it has to be the Americans. So the Americans have asked, and we, I presume, could have said no. Why do you think we've said yes? Is there financial gain to us?
I don't think that Sri Lanka has not initiated this or played some role in that initiation.
Yeah.
Because I mean, America certainly is not going to force it on this country unless there is some reciprocative response to that.
Indeed.
So what is intriguing is who in Sri Lanka initiated this?
Now that sounds like a good question.
I mean, who in Sri Lanka initiated? Now the president very clearly, in absolute clear terms, following a statement made by the Mahanayaka Theros jointly with the Reverend Cardinal, jointly, very recently, discussing about this issue, the coming of the American forces into the country, when they declared and said that under no circumstances should we permit the American military forces to come and occupy in Sri Lanka or play a role here. The president in response very clearly said, I will not permit that. Now, president, we thought, is representing the government.
Yeah.
Now, if that is the case, why is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, discussing and negotiating in Washington about the various aspects concerning the SOFA?
Are you saying that the foreign minister is deliberately leaving out the president?
No, I mean, are there two governments in this country, Faraz? What I'm asking is, we like to know who initiated this. In trying to find an answer to that question, when we look at what is happening, we see the president of the country, who still has some executive power left with him. He says, no, I will not permit this to happen. And he being the Minister of Defense. You see, coming of military forces into a country is something to do with, it's a military affair.
Yeah.
It's definitely something to do with security and defense.
So we need our antennas to be up.
The defense minister of the country has to necessarily be associated in such an exercise.
Right.
Now, in that situation, when he takes up a different position, how can the Minister of Foreign Affairs go and continue a dialogue in Washington, discussing the various aspects, the nitty-gritties of the agreement?
They seem to be ignoring the president.
Partly it is a question of ignoring, partly they are going ahead with something that they originally wanted.
They're going ahead with their agenda. Some unseen agenda. Right. But one of the very most worrying parts of this agreement is that the U.S. forces and civilian employees of the United States Department of Defense shall be awarded diplomatic immunity. Now it means that Sri Lankan law will not apply to those troops whose boots are on the ground here.
Yes.
Now that I think you related a story to me some time ago about the impact in real terms.
Yes.
In terms of the law.
Yes.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, it was the location is Japan.
Yes.
Same sort of agreement in place.
Yes.
And it's easy to see why Japan would agree to that, because after the World War II, they took an active decision not to engage in that sort of thing.
Yes.
So anyway, American troops on there, a member of the American troop force,
Yes.
military, murdered, killed a Japanese female national. Now, that soldier, that official, he went away, left Japan under the guise of diplomatic immunity. The Japanese went to court, and in the United States they ruled that that man must be subject to Japanese law, and so I believe he was sent back.
Yes.
Is that about right?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. There are three types of SOFA agreements.
Right.
One is historically the important thing is the NATO countries. That is how it first started. The NATO countries had under a treaty, they had an agreement with the United States for the American military forces to be in the NATO countries.
Yeah.
So they were operating under a treaty, and there was no necessity for them to enter into agreements as such, but an exchange of notes or some understanding would suffice for the American forces to occupy their country. Or occupy certain places, so do some activity in their country. But in the case of other countries which are not covered under the NATO, they go as standalone agreements. Each country has its own way of dealing and entering into an agreement under the SOFA arrangement. SOFA agreements there is no stereotype thing, no. There is no length, there is no breadth for the agreement. The conditionalities are different. It applies to each country differently.
It's almost ad hoc.
Yeah, very ad hoc, very ad hoc. Now, for example, with Bangladesh, they had a one-page agreement.
Okay.
One page. Now, what we are told is that we had an AXA agreement with Sri Lanka running into 80 pages. You see? So, therefore, now the SOFA agreement that they have with Germany is 200 pages. Now, the question, coming back to your question.
Yeah.
There are two ways in which the jurisdictional part of that is applicable to the military forces that occupy in a foreign soil apply. They can come to an understanding between the two countries that they share the jurisdiction.
Right.
They can share it. In certain aspects, it is the American law. With regard to certain other things, it is the law of the land or the country. Now, in another instance, there is no sharing. It is entirely and totally the American law jurisdiction that will be applicable to the forces that are in a foreign country. Not only the forces, those employed by the forces, those contracted by the forces too are subject to the same jurisdiction. Now, this is a very serious matter. Now, what happened in Japan is, this question was not sorted out. And it was virtually left open, and then when this murder took place, when this guy was deported, the Japanese government wanted to bring some justice. The victimized person was a person in Japan who had some kind of a cover under the Japanese constitution, but that cannot be afforded by the Japanese government to that person, the victim or victim's party, or to the country, because the man has already left. So therefore they applied to the American the states, and then they wanted to deport this man. He went to courts in the United States, and there was a deciding case by the Supreme Court of United States in a habeas corpus application made by this Japanese soldier, the American soldier, while in America, about this Japanese murder. The decision of the Supreme Court was, whatever the offense is, if that is committed in a foreign land, the law, the jurisdiction that should apply in that case should be the law of that land, not that of the United States. So this is a very important issue.
Indeed.
You know, if unless United States want to sort of by force impose a condition where under any given circumstances it is the jurisdiction of US that should apply, I mean, that's a very serious situation. Accidents can take place, murders can take place. They may be attacked by the people of the soil,
Yeah.
the army, the military personnel. Whose law is applicable in such instances? It's a very serious question. So, I mean, I am, of course, I do not wish to dwell on this part of this subject,
Yeah.
because I am more worried about why at all the American soldiers should come here. Who wants it? What I feel is,
Yes.
if there is any initiative on this matter, it is the American government that wants them to be here for one reason, because strategically the presence of United States in the Asian Pacific region is becoming extremely important in the context of the journey that China and the other Asian giants have gone through. You know, it's a huge development phase that the Asian region has gone through, and it is trying to go through, which the United States cannot ignore. It is not a military aggression.
Yes.
It is not a military approach. It is an economic development that is taking place in the Asian region, which is not rivaled in any way according to the what is happening in the European countries and the Western countries.
Right.
It's by far superseding in every aspect. They are trying to take the lead in the economic field in the Asian Pacific region with the help of China, with the assistance of China, with the involvement of China in many countries, in many fields. Just to cite an example for us. You and I, when we talk about the economy, we always talk about the IMF.
Indeed.
We talk about the World Bank.
Indeed.
We talk about the WHO.
Yep.
Asian Development Bank, of course, is in the Asian context. But do you know that 2 decades ago, from that time, the IMF and the World Bank has failed to finance the projects that are in the pipeline in the Asian region? Now, to overcome that situation, China has taken a very important economic initiative.
And which is?
They have set up a bank called Asian Investment and Infrastructure Bank, which most of the people thought it's a rival to IMF and the World Bank. It is not so. They are only trying to supplement a requirement. Now, there are 56 economic zones that are associated with the China BRI initiative.
The Belt and Road Initiative.
Belt and Road Initiative.
Indeed.
In the associated countries.
Indeed.
Now,
And actually, whilst we're talking about this, let's see whether we can play a clip of a most fascinating part of that Belt and Road Initiative.
Development, you mean?
Yes, it's a development which is absolutely amazing, and I wonder if John, who's in our control room, will play that clip. But whilst we're talking, they'll play it now.
Yeah.
But that's a very, and here it is. This is a railway link that leaves Beijing, leaves China, and goes all the way to Tehran. Overland. It also goes on to Europe. It can go up to Germany. It takes about 14 days for 200 containers. If you see that train, if you stood in one point and let this train go past you, it'll take approximately 40 minutes. It's that long. And it's absolutely fascinating that there's a rail link all the way from China to Tehran and then onwards to Europe.
Yes.
And this is also part, four engines are pulling a 200 containers.
Yeah.
And the journey takes about 14 days.
It's a beautiful presentation. Thank you, Faraz.
Yes, there you are.
It gives It gives a cross-sectional view of what is happening with the Chinese intervention in the Belt and Road Initiative. This is what I was talking about.
This is also good for Sri Lankan exporters.
Yes, my God, yes.
Yeah.
3.5 months it takes
Yeah.
for the loading and the unloading and the whole process, import-export process to complete.
Yeah.
You know, with the loading, with the transport, with the unloading and with the transport, sailing, all the time involved, we count about 3.5 months from Tehran to China.
Right.
But now it's 14 days, as you said.
Yeah.
You see, the world is becoming very narrow.
Much smaller.
Smaller, very smaller. Not that. You see, the assistance they give with this, the facilitation, the safety, and right along this road, this track, the countries in the adjoining area, you know, they are part and parcel of this development.
Absolutely.
This is what I said. 56 economic zones are waiting to go ahead with their own plans of development, and they need $150 billion.
So this is not sort of expansion just to take over land. This is an economic expansion
Exactly. Now this is the
on the
difference.
part of the
No,
Chinese.
nobody can claim or say that this is an aggression, military aggression or invasion, because the countries around this, what that you showed,
Yeah.
most of the countries are countries that broke away from Soviet Russia. The new countries, you know, the newborn
Yes, and
countries.
the new,
Yeah, the last
the
decade.
former Eastern Bloc.
That's right. Last decade we saw the development or evolution of many such countries.
Right.
And you know, in some countries, the GDP has grown by 300%.
Wow, that's a lot.
They were desperate and they broke away to have their own way. So this is an aspect that nobody in the world can just ignore.
Yeah.
And this massive development that is taking place is an important aspect for US to be concerned seriously. If they don't, there will be serious consequences for their economy.
Mr. Rusiripala, thank you very much for giving us another dimension to SOFA and so on. And it's clear that this is a battle between American interests, American agendas, and somehow they've had a foothold here in Sri Lanka. But in the meantime, we also showed what China is doing.
I wish to interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
But this American interest is being supported by the agents who are in Sri Lanka, who support the neoliberal expansion of the neoliberal economy. They are, as agents, they have a role to play, and they want to support the aggression or invasion or whatever in that term.
And would this also include sending consultants to Sri Lanka's parliament?
Definitely. Not only consultants, even mapping out the Sri Lankan land,
Yeah.
changing the laws of the country.
Why, what's the matter? Don't we have surveyors here?
They have done a complete survey.
All right.
And
Well, we've run out of time, but we must discuss this and take this further because it's obviously very important. Mr. Rusiripala Tennakoon, thank you very much for being on Newsline Prime. We really appreciate your time, and that's the way it was. So let's wish you a very good evening. Thank you for watching, and of course, God bless.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.